Millionaire saw Maid's daughter secretly teaching his son. What he did next stunned everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. In the grandiose mansion of billionaire Alexander Sinclair, where wealth and power radiated from every corner, something extraordinary was quietly unfolding behind closed doors. The Sinclair family estate was nothing short of a fortress. Polished marble floors, towering chandeliers made of crystal, and a sprawling backyard that could rival the size of a small town. Yet, within the walls of this opulence, a young girl was changing the course of one of the most powerful families in the world, without anyone even realizing it. Her name was Emily, the quiet and humble daughter of the family's maid. She had always been told to stay out of sight, to keep her head down, and to blend in with the background. But Emily was different. With a quiet determination, she had been teaching young Samuel Sinclair, the billionaire's son, secret lessons that no one knew about. Samuel, at only 12 years old, was a boy of great promise but also a deeply troubled child. The weight of his family's expectations pressed down on him daily, and the tutors his father hired were either too focused on results or too eager to please the Sinclairs. The only person who seemed to understand him was Emily. What started as a simple act of kindness, helping Samuel with his homework, quickly turned into something far more profound. Emily had a way of explaining things that made sense, in a way that Samuel's wealthy tutors never could. She didn't just teach him academic lessons. She also taught him about life, kindness, and the value of perseverance. Over time, Samuel began to look forward to his secret lessons with Emily. He trusted her, something he rarely did with anyone else. He had begun to open up to her in ways that he couldn't with his parents or friends. Little did anyone know, behind the polished doors of the Sinclair mansion, this unlikely teacher and student duo had created a bond that would soon shock everyone. One afternoon, as Emily was helping Samuel with his latest science project in the quiet corner of the massive library, something happened that neither of them could have predicted. Samuel's father, Alexander Sinclair, the powerful billionaire, walked into the room unexpectedly. He had been busy with business meetings all day, and when he walked into the library to check on his son, what he saw made his jaw drop. There was his son, sitting on the floor with Emily, quietly discussing a topic that seemed too advanced for someone his age. Emily, noticing Samuel's father at the door, froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. She had never expected anyone to find out about the lessons she had been giving Samuel. But Alexander's reaction was not what she had feared. Instead of anger or dismissal, Alexander's expression shifted from surprise to something else, something almost unrecognizable. What had started as a simple observation of a student's progress had turned into a revelation for Alexander Sinclair. He stood there for a moment, processing what he had just witnessed. His son, a boy who had always been distant and hard to reach, was engaging in a meaningful and insightful conversation with someone who, on paper, seemed to be nothing more than a maid's daughter. This moment was not just an eye-opener for Alexander. It would change everything. The question now was, what would he do next? As Alexander Sinclair stood there, frozen for a moment in the doorway, he couldn't quite process what he had just seen. His son, Samuel, the boy who had been so difficult and distant for years, was now sitting on the floor of the library, deeply engaged in a conversation with Emily, the daughter of the family's maid. Emily, with her quiet demeanor and humble background, had managed to do something no one else had been able to do. She had reached Samuel in a way that no one else could. Alexander's mind raced as he processed the unexpected sight before him. He was used to seeing his son surrounded by tutors, professionals, and experts, all hired to give Samuel the best education money could buy. But this was different. Emily, a girl who was supposed to remain invisible in the Sinclair household, had done something no amount of wealth or power could. She had connected with Samuel in a way that was real, human, and unpretentious. Alexander cleared his throat, breaking the silence, and as he did, Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. She quickly rose to her feet, unsure of what the billionaire would say or do next. Samuel, on the other hand, didn't flinch. He simply looked at his father, a calm expression on his face, as though he knew this moment was inevitable. "Dad, this is Emily. She's been helping me with my schoolwork," Samuel said, his voice steady. But there was an underlying sincerity in his tone that Alexander wasn't used to hearing from his son. Alexander's eyes flicked between Emily and Samuel, trying to make sense of the situation. "Helping you?" he asked, his voice sharp but tinged with curiosity. "Yes, Dad," Samuel replied, his tone a bit more defensive now. "She's not just helping with homework. She's teaching me things that no one else has been able to." Alexander raised an eyebrow. This was certainly not what he had expected. As he looked at Emily, the maid's daughter, standing there so composed and calm, he couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and disbelief. Emily had been with the Sinclair family for years, yet Alexander had never really paid attention to her. She had always been just another face in the background, a servant who cleaned, cooked, and kept to herself. But now, seeing her in this light, engaged in an intellectual conversation with his son, he couldn't ignore the stark contrast between her and the expensive tutors he had hired. He felt a pang of guilt. It had never occurred to him that someone like Emily, someone who had been looked down upon by his family, might be capable of teaching his son in a way that even the best educators had failed to do. "I didn't know you were teaching him," Alexander finally said, his voice softer now. Emily's eyes dropped to the floor, her usual shyness taking over. I just help him when he needs it," she said quietly, almost apologetically. But Samuel quickly intervened. "She's more than just a tutor, Dad. She's the one who listens. She actually cares." For the first time, Alexander felt a spark of something unfamiliar, pride, perhaps. His son, the boy who had always been so distant, was finally speaking about someone with respect. And the fact that this someone was Emily, the maid's daughter, made it all the more unexpected. "I see," Alexander murmured, his mind still spinning. He didn't know how to react to this new reality. He had spent so many years focusing on building his empire, on making sure that everything was in its place, that he had failed to notice the simple, human connections that really mattered. As he stood there, watching Emily and Samuel exchange looks, something shifted inside him. He had always thought that wealth and power could buy everything: education, respect, success. But what he was witnessing now, in this quiet library, was something money couldn't buy. It was something much more valuable. This was the start of a new chapter, not just for Samuel, but for the entire Sinclair family. The question was, what would Alexander do now? Would he embrace this new reality, or would he try to shut it down, as he had with so many things in the past? The following days in the Sinclair mansion were filled with an unexpected tension. Alexander Sinclair, despite his wealth and the powerful empire he had built, found himself in a position that was foreign to him. He had always relied on his business acumen and strategic decisions, but what he was experiencing now was something that no amount of money or power could control. Samuel, his son, had begun to change, not just in his academic performance, but in his outlook on life. He was becoming more thoughtful, more compassionate, and above all, more connected to those around him, especially to Emily, the maid's daughter. As days passed, Alexander couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the dynamics of his home. Samuel, once a boy consumed by the pressures of his family's expectations, had started to open up in ways that Alexander had longed for. And the one person responsible for this transformation was Emily. Alexander couldn't ignore the fact that his son had grown to trust her in ways that even the best tutors could not achieve. Samuel began to spend more time with Emily, not just for schoolwork, but for life lessons. He was eager to learn from her, her quiet wisdom, her unique perspective on the world, and the way she treated others with respect, no matter their status. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the conversation took an unexpected turn. As usual, Alexander and his wife, Catherine, were discussing the latest business ventures and high society matters. But tonight, Samuel spoke up in a way that stopped everyone in their tracks. "I don't want to go to that charity gala tomorrow," Samuel said, his voice calm but firm. "I'd rather stay and talk with Emily. She's been teaching me things that I need to understand, things I didn't even know I was missing." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one knew how to respond. Catherine blinked in disbelief, her eyes wide. "What are you talking about, Samuel?" she asked, a hint of confusion in her tone. You need to go to these events. You need to meet people, make connections. That's how you succeed. But Samuel shook his head. I don't need to make connections with people who don't care about anything but themselves, he said. Emily has taught me more about real life in the past few weeks than I've learned from all the business meetings, charity galas, and fancy dinners we've been to. Alexander, still reeling from the shock of hearing his son speak with such conviction, finally spoke. Samuel, you don't understand. These events are important. They shape your future. You can't just ignore them because you don't feel like going. But Samuel's response was calm and unwavering. Maybe that's the problem, he said. Maybe I've been taught to care about things that don't matter. Emily showed me what truly matters. Understanding people, being kind, and using my knowledge to make a difference, not just to impress others. Alexander sat back in his chair, stunned by his son's words. For the first time, he saw a glimpse of the boy he had always hoped Samuel would become, a young man who valued substance over appearance, who understood that real success wasn't about how many people you knew, but how you impacted the world. It was a moment of clarity for Alexander. He had spent his entire life building an empire, but in that moment, he realized that the true legacy he wanted to leave behind was not measured in dollars or prestige, but in the character of his son. As the evening continued, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Alexander looked at Samuel, his heart swelling with pride. This wasn't just a child rebelling against his parents. This was a young man who had found his own voice, who had learned from someone with no wealth or status, but had somehow become the most important influence in his life. For the first time, Alexander felt a deep respect for Emily. She had done what no amount of tutors, schools, or prestige could. She had reached Samuel in a way no one else could. And in doing so, she had changed the course of his future. As the night wore on, Alexander made a decision. He would stop seeing Emily as just the maid's daughter. He would see her for the person she truly was, a teacher, a mentor, and, most importantly, someone who had made a profound difference in his son's life. It was time to make things right. The following days were a turning point in the Sinclair household. Alexander Sinclair, having witnessed his son's sudden shift in priorities, couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had changed, not just in his son, but within himself. He had always believed that success was measured by wealth, influence, and the ability to control the world around him. But now, Samuel's words echoed in his mind, about valuing understanding, kindness, and true connection over appearances and status. Alexander found himself reflecting more deeply on the lessons Samuel had learned from Emily. He had never truly seen her before, not as a person capable of shaping his son's future, but now, he saw her differently. Emily had done something none of the prestigious tutors or elite schools could accomplish. She had reached Samuel in a way that transformed him into a more thoughtful, compassionate, and self-aware young man. Alexander couldn't deny the importance of the impact she had made. Over the next week, he kept a close eye on his son, observing how Samuel interacted with others. It became clear that the boy had changed. He was more patient, more empathetic, and his conversations had taken on a depth that Alexander hadn't thought possible. It wasn't just the schoolwork that had improved. It was Samuel's entire approach to life. One evening, Alexander sat down with Catherine, his wife, after dinner. They had been silent for some time, both thinking about the same thing. Catherine was the first to break the silence. I don't know what happened, but Samuel is not the same boy he was a few weeks ago. He's more present, more engaged. What do you think? Alexander took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. I think Emily has had a bigger impact on him than we realized. He trusts her, Catherine. He listens to her. Catherine raised an eyebrow. Emily? The maid's daughter? Alexander nodded. Yes, I've been thinking about it, and I don't think we've given her the respect she deserves. She's been teaching Samuel things that no one else could. Catherine looked skeptical, as she always had about the staff. But she's just Emily. She's not even from our world. Alexander met her gaze, his voice calm but firm. That's exactly the point. She isn't from our world, and that's why she's been able to reach him in a way no one else could. She's not trying to impress him. She's just being herself. Catherine fell silent, processing his words. So, what do you want to do about it? She asked finally. Alexander paused, then made a decision. I want to make things right. I want to thank Emily for what she's done, and I want to give her an opportunity to help Samuel in a way that no one else can. She's earned that much. The next day, Alexander made arrangements to meet with Emily. He asked her to come to his study, and when she arrived, he was waiting for her, his demeanor more serious than usual. Emily entered the room, nervous as always in his presence, her head slightly bowed. "Mr. Sinclair, you wanted to see me?" she asked quietly. Alexander stood up, looking at her with a new sense of appreciation. "Emily, I owe you an apology," he began, his voice sincere. "I've overlooked your value in this household, and I've failed to see the positive influence you've had on Samuel. You've taught him things that no one else could, and for that, I am truly grateful." Emily's eyes widened in surprise, her cheeks flushing. I didn't do anything special, sir. I just helped him with his schoolwork," she said, her voice tinged with modesty. Alexander shook his head. "No, Emily. What you've done for Samuel goes far beyond schoolwork. You've given him something much more important. You've given him perspective, kindness, and the courage to be himself. That is invaluable." Emily didn't know what to say. She had always tried to remain invisible, to stay out of the way, never expecting any recognition for her actions. But now, as she stood in front of Alexander Sinclair, she felt a sense of pride she had never known before. "I don't know how to thank you enough," Alexander continued, his voice softening. "But I want you to know that from now on, you will be treated with the respect you deserve in this household. And I'd like you to continue helping Samuel, not just with his studies, but with his growth as a person." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined that something like this could happen. In the midst of the powerful and wealthy Sinclair family, she was being recognized, not for her position, but for her worth as a person. It was a moment that would change everything for her and for Samuel. Alexander smiled, a look of genuine gratitude on his face. "Thank you, Emily," he said. "You've done more for my son than I could ever have hoped for, and I will make sure you're never overlooked again." As Emily left the study, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had come into this family as a maid's daughter, but now she was seen, not just as an employee, but as a mentor, someone whose influence was valued and appreciated. And for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. The days following Alexander's conversation with Emily brought about a dramatic shift within the Sinclair household. Alexander had made it clear to everyone that Emily's presence, her contributions, and her wisdom were no longer to be underestimated. To his surprise, this change was met with more resistance than he anticipated. Catherine, his wife, was still uncertain. Despite the respect Alexander had shown Emily, Catherine couldn't shake off the notion that someone like her, someone who wasn't part of their world, didn't belong in such an elevated position. But Alexander, having witnessed the profound effect Emily had on Samuel, was resolute. He knew that Samuel's growth, both academically and personally, was due in large part to Emily's influence. It was undeniable, and it was something that couldn't be ignored any longer. Samuel, for his part, had embraced the changes wholeheartedly. He was no longer the sullen, distant child who resented the weight of his family's expectations. Instead, he had become a more open and curious young man, seeking to understand the world not through the lens of wealth or status, but through the lens of kindness, humility, and genuine curiosity. He spent more time with Emily, not just for schoolwork, but to engage in deep discussions about life. One afternoon, after a particularly intense lesson with Emily about history and human rights, Samuel sat down with his father. He had something important to say. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about the way things are in this house, and I've come to realize something. I want to do something that matters, something that makes a difference." Alexander, who had been absorbed in business matters, looked up, surprised by the seriousness in Samuel's voice. "What do you mean?" he asked. Samuel's expression was sincere, his tone unwavering. "I don't want to just follow in your footsteps. I don't want to be like all the people you know, people who value wealth and power above all else. I want to use what I have to help others, to make the world better. I've seen how Emily has done that, not with money, but with her actions, with her heart. I want to do that too." Alexander was taken aback. He had never imagined his son, the heir to his vast fortune, would express such a desire. But there was something about the conviction in Samuel's words that made Alexander pause and reconsider his entire worldview. Samuel's transformation was not just about academics. It was about something deeper: values, purpose, and meaning. Emily, despite her humble background, had instilled these qualities in Samuel, and now he was determined to make a difference, regardless of the expectations placed on him. Later that evening, Alexander found himself sitting alone in his study, contemplating Samuel's words. He thought about all the years he had spent building his empire. But now, in the silence of his office, he began to question whether he had truly been successful in the ways that mattered. He had wealth, influence, and power, but had he really made a meaningful impact on the world? Had he taught his son the right lessons? The realization hit him hard. Samuel's transformation wasn't just a reflection of his own growth. It was a reflection of Alexander's failure to see the true value of the people around him. Emily, who had once been invisible in his eyes, had shown Samuel something far more valuable than money: the importance of compassion, understanding, and using one's gifts to help others. The next morning, Alexander called Samuel into his office. "Son," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking about what you said last night, and I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the young man you're becoming. And I realize now that it's time for me to step back from some of the things I've been focused on. I want to help you make the world a better place, not just through business, but through something more meaningful." Samuel, surprised by his father's words, smiled. It was the first time he had ever seen his father truly open up, truly acknowledge the deeper values that mattered. Emily's quiet influence had not only shaped his future, but had also had a profound effect on Alexander. In the end, the Sinclair family would never be the same. They had all learned something invaluable. True success wasn't measured in wealth or power, but in the impact one had on the lives of others. As the weeks passed, a noticeable shift took place within the Sinclair household. The change in Samuel was becoming even more apparent to everyone around him. His conversations were deeper, more thoughtful, and his interests had shifted from the superficial world of wealth and status to something much more meaningful. Emily, the maid's daughter, had not only changed his outlook on life, but she had also transformed the dynamics of the family. Samuel began to openly challenge the status quo, questioning long-standing traditions that once seemed immovable. One evening, as the Sinclair family gathered for dinner, Samuel made a bold statement that would leave everyone in shock. "Dad, I want to start a charity," he said, looking directly at Alexander. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one spoke. Catherine, still struggling to fully accept the changes in their family, narrowed her eyes. "A charity?" she asked skeptically. "What do you know about running a charity?" Samuel, now more confident than ever, replied, "I know it's about helping people who don't have what we do. Emily has shown me that there's more to life than money. I want to make a real difference in the world, Dad. I want to use my position to help people who don't have the same opportunities we do." The table was silent, and for the first time in years, Alexander felt a weight on his chest. His son, who had once been the embodiment of privilege, was now telling him he wanted to give it all away. It wasn't about building an empire anymore. It was about making a human connection, about using his resources for something bigger than himself. Alexander had spent so many years chasing success, but now he was faced with a new question: what truly defined success? Was it wealth, power, and influence? Or was it something deeper, something that could never be measured in dollars and cents? "You're serious about this?" Alexander asked, his voice tinged with surprise. "Yes, I am," Samuel said, his voice steady. "I want to create something that will help kids who don't have access to the same education, opportunities, or resources. I want to be the person who makes sure they don't feel invisible, just like Emily taught me to do." Alexander's mind raced. His son had never been this passionate about anything before. He had always been focused on the next business venture, the next event, the next deal. But now, Samuel was focused on something else entirely. It was a cause that would require time, effort, and most importantly, genuine dedication. Emily had made him realize that real change came not from trying to win the game, but from helping others who had been left out. Catherine, still unsure about this new direction, spoke up. "But this is going to take time, Samuel. You can't just start a charity overnight. You're going to have to put in a lot of work. Are you ready for that?" Samuel didn't hesitate. "I am," he said. "This is important to me. More than anything else, this is what I want to do with my life." Alexander looked at his son, his heart swelling with pride and awe. This wasn't the same boy who had once been obsessed with appearing perfect. This was a young man who had found his purpose. And it was because of Emily that Samuel had seen the world in a way that no one else had. Alexander knew he had to support his son. For the first time in years, he realized that true success wasn't about being the richest or most influential. It was about making a positive difference in the world. That night, after dinner, Alexander called Emily into his study. When she arrived, he spoke to her with the respect she had long deserved. "Emily, I want to thank you," he said. "You've done something for my son that no amount of money could have. You've changed him in ways I never could have imagined. And I want you to know that we're going to make this charity happen. Samuel has your support, and now he has mine too." Emily, who had always kept to herself and never expected recognition, looked at him, surprised. "I didn't do anything special, sir," she said quietly. Alexander smiled gently. "You did more than you realize. You've shown my son what truly matters, and for that, I'm grateful." Emily nodded, a small but genuine smile crossing her face. She had never imagined that her small act of kindness, her decision to simply teach and support Samuel, would lead to such profound changes. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a maid's daughter, but as someone who had made a difference. And for Samuel, the journey was just beginning. With the support of his father and Emily's guidance, Samuel was determined to make a lasting impact on the world. The Sinclair family would never be the same again. The charity Samuel wanted to start was no longer just an idea. It was quickly becoming a reality. With Alexander's support, they began making plans, organizing resources, and discussing ways to create meaningful change. Emily, despite her initial hesitance, became an integral part of the project. She had always believed in the power of education and empathy, but now, she was helping Samuel shape a foundation that could help children just like him. Children who often felt overlooked, whose potential had been stifled by their circumstances. In the beginning, it was a slow and difficult process. They needed funding, volunteers, and most importantly, the right people who shared the vision. But Samuel's newfound passion, combined with Alexander's influence, began to attract others. Soon, a network of like-minded individuals, including former tutors, educators, and philanthropists, began to rally behind the cause. As the foundation grew, so did Samuel. He took on a leadership role, managing the development of programs that would provide scholarships, mentorship, and educational resources for underprivileged youth. Emily was there every step of the way, not just as a mentor, but as a guide who helped Samuel stay grounded in his purpose. She reminded him, time and time again, that success wasn't about the size of the donation or the number of people they could impress, but about the real impact they had on the lives of others. As the months went by, the foundation began to make strides. They were able to sponsor several young students, giving them opportunities to attend schools and programs that they never thought possible. Samuel visited these students regularly, meeting with them, hearing their stories, and seeing firsthand how their lives were changing. It was the first time he truly understood the power of giving. One afternoon, as Samuel sat with Emily in the office, reviewing the latest round of applications for their scholarship program, he looked up from the paperwork and said, "This is it. This is what I was meant to do." Emily smiled softly, proud of the young man he had become. "You've always known, Samuel," she replied. "You just had to find your own path. And you're walking it now." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As with any major project, there were obstacles. There were disagreements among board members, funding setbacks, and moments of self-doubt. But Samuel never wavered. With Emily by his side, he remained focused on the mission. He had learned from her that every challenge was an opportunity to grow and learn. One particular challenge stood out. During a major fundraising event, the Sinclair family's reputation was called into question. Critics and some of the public began to question whether someone so wealthy could genuinely care about helping the less fortunate. They saw it as just another charitable effort to polish the family name. Samuel was crushed. For the first time, he doubted the sincerity of his own actions. "Maybe they're right," he said, sitting in his office one evening, his face buried in his hands. "Maybe this is all just for show. Maybe I'm not really making a difference." Emily, who had always been a steady presence in his life, sat down beside him. "Do you believe you're making a difference?" she asked gently. Samuel looked up, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "I do," he said, his voice weak. "But it's hard when others don't see it." Emily took a deep breath. Then that's all that matters, Samuel. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You know in your heart what you're doing. Keep moving forward, no matter what they say. You've already changed lives. Samuel sat in silence, absorbing her words. Slowly, he began to realize that the critics and doubters would always be there. But what mattered was his commitment to the cause, to the kids who were relying on him. He wasn't doing it for recognition or praise. He was doing it because he believed in it. In the end, the fundraising event was a success, not because of the money raised, but because Samuel and his team managed to stay true to their mission. They weren't swayed by public opinion or the desire for accolades. They were focused on the people they were helping, and that was enough. As the foundation continued to grow, so did Samuel's sense of purpose. He was no longer just the heir to the Sinclair fortune. He was a young man with a mission, with a purpose that transcended wealth and status. And Emily, the quiet girl who had once been invisible in the Sinclair household, had become one of the most important people in his life. She had not only changed him, but had helped him change the world. Samuel now knew that true wealth wasn't measured by the size of his bank account, but by the lives he touched and the difference he made in the world. As the months continued to pass, the Sinclair family found themselves adjusting to the changes that had taken root in their home. Samuel, once a boy confined by his family's expectations, had transformed into someone with a deep sense of purpose. His charity had blossomed beyond anyone's expectations, and his desire to make a difference was now driving him forward in ways that Alexander had never thought possible. However, the journey was not without its challenges. As the foundation grew, so did the scrutiny. There were still many who questioned Samuel's motivations, some even doubting the sincerity of his efforts. Critics, both inside and outside of the Sinclair family's social circle, whispered that Samuel was merely trying to redeem the family name, using his newfound cause as a way to soften the image of his privileged upbringing. But Samuel, now more resilient than ever, was undeterred. He had learned from Emily that the opinions of others mattered little if the work was genuine and true. One evening, as the foundation's success was being celebrated at an event, Samuel stood at the front of a crowded ballroom, looking out over a sea of faces. The event had been a massive success, raising funds that would change the lives of countless children, but Samuel wasn't focused on the accolades. He wasn't interested in the applause or the recognition. His mind kept returning to the kids whose stories he had heard firsthand, whose lives were going to be transformed because of the work they had all done. He thought about Emily and how, through her quiet strength and unwavering belief in him, he had found a purpose that went beyond the world of wealth and influence. Emily had never sought recognition for her role in the foundation, and that was one of the things Samuel admired most about her. She had simply done what was needed without hesitation, and through her actions, she had taught him the greatest lesson of all. True leadership wasn't about standing in the spotlight. It was about empowering others, making sure their voices were heard, and creating opportunities for them to succeed. As the evening wore on, Alexander found himself standing next to his son, both of them watching as the event unfolded. Alexander could see the man Samuel was becoming, and for the first time, he didn't feel the need to control or guide him. Samuel was charting his own path now, one that was based on the values of compassion, integrity, and service. Alexander turned to his son, his voice low, but full of pride. "You've done more than I ever imagined possible," he said. Samuel, who had been lost in thought, turned to look at his father, surprised by the softness in his voice. "What do you mean, Dad?" he asked. Alexander smiled, placing a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "I mean that I'm proud of you. You've done something real. You've made a difference in a way I couldn't have. And you did it without asking for anything in return." Samuel nodded slowly, taking in his father's words. It was a moment of profound understanding between them, one that had been a long time coming. Alexander had spent his life building an empire, but now he understood that true wealth wasn't measured in the millions of dollars in his bank account, but in the lives he had touched, the impact he had made on the world, and the legacy he would leave behind. Emily had shown them all what it meant to make a difference. She had shown them that it wasn't about wealth or status. It was about using what you had to help others, to create a better world. As the night drew to a close, Samuel stepped away from the crowd, making his way to the balcony of the mansion. The stars above were clear and bright, a stark contrast to the busy world inside. He stood there for a moment, taking in the view, and reflecting on everything that had led him to this point. He thought about the early days of the foundation, when he wasn't sure if anyone would listen to him, when he wasn't sure if his ideas were enough to make a real impact. But now, standing there, looking at the future, he felt something he had never felt before: hope. Hope for a world that could be better, hope for the people whose lives he could change, and hope for a future where kindness and understanding would prevail over wealth and status. As he turned to go back inside, he saw Emily standing at the door, watching him. She smiled softly as he approached. "You did good, Samuel," she said, her voice filled with warmth. Samuel smiled back, his heart full. "We did good, Emily," he replied. And in that moment, both of them knew that the work they had started together was just the beginning. The foundation they had built was only a small part of the change they hoped to bring to the world, but it was enough to know that they had made a difference. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, committed to the cause and the people they served. As the years passed, the Sinclair Foundation continued to grow, and so did the impact it had on the lives of countless young people. Samuel had become a beacon of hope for those who once felt invisible, and Emily had remained by his side, her quiet strength and wisdom guiding him through every challenge. The Foundation's programs expanded, offering scholarships, mentorships, and access to education for children from all walks of life. It wasn't just about providing opportunities. It was about giving these children the tools they needed to believe in themselves and create a better future. The foundation had started as a small idea, but it had grown into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Looking back, Samuel could hardly believe how far they had come. The young boy who had once been disconnected from the world had now become a leader, driven by a purpose that was bigger than himself. He had learned that success wasn't about how much wealth you accumulated, but about how you used that wealth to make a difference. One afternoon, as the sun set over the Sinclair estate, Samuel and Emily sat together on the balcony, watching the world change before their eyes. The foundation was holding its largest event yet, and they had just secured a partnership with a major organization that would allow them to reach even more children. The future, for the first time, felt incredibly bright. Samuel turned to Emily, his face reflecting both pride and gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you, Emily," he said quietly. Emily smiled, her eyes softening. "You've done it all yourself, Samuel. I've only been here to help guide you. You found your path, and you're walking it in the most amazing way." Samuel shook his head. "No, you show me the way. You taught me how to see the world differently, how to truly care about people. You've changed my life more than you'll ever know." Emily's eyes glistened, touched by his words. "I'm just glad I could be a part of it," she said, her voice steady and calm. As the event unfolded inside, Samuel's thoughts turned to the young people they had helped along the way. Children who had once believed they had no future. He thought of the first scholarship recipient, a girl who had struggled to read but was now excelling in college, and the young boy who had never known stability but was now thriving in a safe, supportive environment. These were the stories that mattered, the stories that made all the hard work worth it. As the evening continued, Samuel found himself once again standing at the front of a crowded room, addressing an audience that had come to celebrate the success of the foundation. This time, though, his words were different. He wasn't just speaking to the donors or the volunteers. He was speaking to the children whose lives had been changed, whose dreams had been made possible because of the work they had all done together. "This foundation is not just mine," Samuel said, his voice carrying across the room. "It belongs to every person who has ever felt like they didn't have a chance, to every child who thought they couldn't make it. We are all part of this, and together, we will continue to change the world." The room erupted in applause, but Samuel's eyes found Emily in the crowd. She was smiling, proud of him, proud of everything they had accomplished. In that moment, Samuel understood what truly mattered. It wasn't the applause, the recognition, or the success of the foundation that defined him. It was the lives they had touched, the change they had made, and the way they had all worked together to create something greater than themselves. As the night came to a close, Samuel and Emily stepped out into the cool evening air, standing together in the quiet of the night. They had built something beautiful, and the future looked brighter than ever. "We did it," Samuel said softly, his voice full of awe. Emily nodded, her heart full. "Yes, we did," And as they stood there, side by side, they both knew that this was just the beginning. The journey had only just started, and there was so much more to do. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, committed to making the world a better place, one life at a time. In this heartfelt story of personal growth and transformation, we delve into the journey of a young man whose life takes an unexpected turn, leading him to break free from the constraints of wealth and privilege. Inspired by the impact of someone from a humble background, he learns valuable lessons about kindness, empathy, and the importance of helping others. This is a story of resilience, change, and the power of using one's position for good, set against the backdrop of an influential millionaire family. As we follow the ups and downs of his journey, we witness how his world shifts from materialism to purpose-driven action, showing that real success is not measured by wealth, but by the positive change one can create in the lives of others. The millionaire stories in this narrative reveal how someone, despite growing up with every advantage, finds true fulfillment in giving back, and how the support of others can transform even the most privileged individuals into agents of change. The lessons learned through this incredible journey highlight the impact that genuine human connection and dedication can have on not just one individual, but an entire community. These millionaire stories take us beyond the wealth, offering a deeper understanding of what it means to lead a meaningful life. In this powerful narrative, the protagonist's path is shaped by those who challenge his perspective and help him see beyond the superficial, ultimately inspiring others to follow his lead and make a difference in their own ways.